are you actually detoxing your estrogen appropriately? Because you could be eating the most perfect nutrient-rich diet that helps you really metabolize maybe the estrogen that you're producing, but are you actually going through all three phases of estrogen detox? Because we live in an environment that mimics estrogen. So we live kind of in estrogen soup from our chemicals and our beauty products, and just our environment tends to have specific chemicals and pollutants that mimic estrogen. So if we're trying to optimize our metabolic experience, we have to focus on out as often as we're focusing on in.
Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm so glad you joined us today. You are in for a treat because we have an incredible guest that I feel like is going to bring so many different topics together for you. If you have been stuck maybe looking at different silos of your health and maybe feel like you can't seem to get all the pieces in place or make them make sense. That can be the hardest thing, is to identify a lot of the pieces of your health, but then not know how to get them all connected together. And our guest today is Ellie Kempton, and she's brilliant. She's an incredible communicator. She's so good at what she does. She's a biochemist, a functionally trained dietitian. She's gone to Bastyr University, but she is the founder of Simply Nourished. And really the basis of her teachings are around empowering women to reclaim their health. And she does that in these micro ways of establishing foundations of your health. In fact, she kind of talks about it as being the architect. And I love that. I love that idea or that concept of being the architect of your health, because in a lot of ways, it's not just about identifying the pieces, but it's about how you put them all together. And that's really what creates the life that you experience. So Ellie, we're so honored that you would be here with us. I know this is going to be a fun conversation. We've already talked about our puppies. And so I feel like at this point, it can only go up. Like we started high. We're going to keep it there. It's going to be great. So we've connected over the fact we both are raising puppies right now, which is a whole thing in and of itself. But guys, I'm tangenting on that because, we love dogs. So if you're an animal person, you'll appreciate it.
Oh, yes. We'll weave them in wherever we can.
So true. Well, I would love for you just to start off by sharing with our audience why you're so passionate about helping women in large part through transitions, through different seasons of their health. What has really brought you to this realization that if we don't understand how to navigate transitions and understand the pieces, those core foundations of our health, that we're really going to be struggling? Because I think that's where a lot of people find themselves, is in those places, either the in-between areas where they feel like, oh, I never really got the last season figured out and I don't even know where I'm going. So how do I take something that's broken or something that doesn't seem to be optimized, and now in this transition where I'm frustrated, figure out where I'm going and how to optimize it in the future? So maybe you can even give us some background about how you landed there, because I'm sure there's a personal connection to that and really giving you that purpose in what you're doing right now.
Yes, what a perfect trailhead. So the transition is a space that I think many of us struggle within. And my story began with this struggle within that liminal space. I was an athlete since I was a little girl. And I learned at a very young age to endure grit, and hard meant good. And if it needed willpower, even better. Because as an athlete, you learn to bulldoze your way through transitions to get to the next outcome, to win and to perform. And so in learning that across the decades, I lost touch with this beautiful space of transition where you are given this gorgeous opportunity to reclaim your agency and come back into alignment and zoom out a few layers and see what your body needs and listen to its whisperings. So as a collegiate athlete, I was swimming many hours a day, studying biochemistry, bulldozing my way through every transition, every whispering from my body. Those blinking lights on my body's dashboard were getting louder and louder and louder. And it was 2 weeks before Olympic trials that I had to tune in. I hurt everywhere. I had not allowed myself to accept the invitation to come back to a space where I understood what my body was asking for, because that's really the punctuation of the transition, is that acceptance, that opportunity to tune in. And having not listened to that for years, for decades, what happened is I had to start seeking external advice, external mentorship and tests, and really figure out what was going on. And I was diagnosed ultimately with Crohn's. So this was the biggest invitation that I had to actually pause, to really relish in this transition, and to actually be okay in a liminal space. And having known some of the clinical markers, and of course I knew enough to be dangerous. I was a biochemist. So here I am asking the crazy questions, really challenging maybe the more traditional approach to treating Crohn's. And what I looked for is what I now teach, which is a very integrative, very comprehensive approach to the human body. And I didn't know at the time that this would be what I would pursue as a career, but having experienced firsthand the approach to medicine, where you do look at it from multiple angles and you come in as this architect and you lay this foundation that you could imagine being rooted in for a long time, that changed my life. So I went straight into functional medicine, really focusing on dietetics, because I feel like the world of dietetics can be very reductionistic. It can be very isolation driven, maybe more intervention driven, right? You do all the right things. And what I love about what you share in this podcast is just how much you have to honor both the intervention, but then also the grace of being a human being, and really maybe the cyclical nature of having to learn things again and again before you fully integrate them. So I've been now a dietitian for 12 years. And in my time as a dietitian, I have learned that it is so impactful to not only know the cutting edge science, know how to prescribe a specific way of eating, and really look at the labs and get really clinical about your approach, but then ultimately to get someone really comfortable about being curious, get someone really comfortable about maybe looking at the issue more expansively instead of being certain about what to do, because that can put you in a place of constriction. So I love the fact that you are as dialed into this transition as I am. It has made such a difference in my life and in the lives of the women I serve, because what we're doing today is not necessarily aligned with, or what we used to do is not necessarily aligned with the body of what we have today. We have to reclaim that alignment again by shifting what we do to put ourselves back into a state of integration.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. There are two different types of transitions. Maybe I'm leaving something out, but in my mind, this is what I think of. There's a transition that's forced in your life, and that is the transition of, hey, I've been pushing the throttle too hard, like what you described. You are physically and mentally bottomed out. Your body's given everything it has, and now its adaptive response, that stress response system, says no more. We don't have any more reserve. We cannot adapt to the stress. The stress is too much to bear. And then there are the transitions that are seasonal in our life. Those are the ones that we expect. So if you're a female, that's maybe the transition of being a child, going through puberty, and now your hormones are changing to your sex hormones are now more regulated. And then there's the transition from the childbirthing years to menopause, perimenopause, and menopause. Those are the ones that are the benchmarks that many women can at least expect. But the transitions that I would say many of us face so much of the time are the transitions where life circumstances are now creating such resistance to our physiology that it's forcing us to have to make decisions to do things differently. Would you say that you have the same approach to both of those? That the same tools can be used for the person that needs a life raft as the person that's just going through life, and maybe they just are transitioning into a different season and they're fully aware of it and they're trying to embrace it, but maybe they're struggling a little bit because they don't fully understand all the mechanisms at play. Are those the same tools that can be utilized to get somebody out of those kinds of situations?
There is a very common denominator that I want to dive into, and that is the tool that I feel like is most impactful for anyone's wellness journey, which is the tool of self awareness. Being able to identify what it is that is happening in your emotional landscape and your physical landscape, even though the first type of transition you reference, the more abrupt, the more forced transition, may require a bit more self-awareness because it took less to get to that place of brokenness. I do feel like both scenarios require this softening and this aerial viewpoint of thinking about the way you think, watching the way you perform life, and really just getting a feel for how you orchestrate your day. I have this beautiful reflection exercise that I have my clients do, both in a group setting and in one-on-one care. And that is I have them perform what I call a bug book. And this bug book is the opportunity to actually take yourself out of the picture and describe everything you're doing throughout the day as though you're watching a little bug perform it. So there's no criticism, there's no shame, there's no pressure. You're literally watching this bug perform life and just softening into a space of compassion, watching this bug maybe freak out over traffic. Or maybe this bug is super duper drawn towards sugar when they're tired at the end of a long day. So this common denominator, this thread of self-awareness allows you to build a deeper sense of knowing, because whether you're ruptured or you're in a space of just perpetual revolution, that beautiful transition state that you described, where we go through a 24-hour cycle with different hormones being produced throughout the day, whereas women going through our hormonal cycles throughout the month, that's just a state of revolution, but they both require this ability to be super compassionate before we start the intervention. And I'll tell you from my perspective, having really tried to do the intervention in isolation without the contextual awareness of what's actually going on. And a key component to this is what I am aiming for, what I identify with, what my values are. When you try to intervene without an awareness of the patterns and an awareness of your identity, it just feels hard. It feels like an uphill battle. You begin to identify with a goat. You just keep going up and up and up, and nothing seems to get easier. So as tempting as it is, especially in the first scenario you described, the rupture scenario where you feel like you just need a lifeline, that it may be the self-awareness piece may be even more impactful.
Yeah, the self-awareness piece is something that comes up very often in many of our podcast conversations. And I think that a lot of people are really starting to understand that if you don't address the mindset piece, then your efforts towards helping or supporting your physical body can really not lead to a whole lot of positive outcome, because if you're the things that are influencing you every day, they end up influencing how you do things, which become the patterns, which then become the systems that you operate from. And you may have really toxic systems that you operate from in your life. And unless you said that isolation piece, man, I'm telling you, the greatest thing you can do is have some good mentorship in your life, because when you can really be exposed to somebody that can help point out some of the things that might not be contributing to your health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health, you may just be walking blindly, and you may be living with patterns and habits in your life that don't support where it is that you think you're going. I mean, that alone is a huge problem, because you may have the vision board and you may think that's where I want to go. But if you don't have enough perspective to be able to see, are the decisions I'm making every day helping me get there? Because if they're not, if they're very critical, if you're getting up every day and you're speaking negativity and you're disgusted with yourself and you don't think highly of yourself and you're just disappointed constantly, then you're just going to reap that fruit. Like, that isn't fruit. That's you're just digging out the seeds and not even giving something a chance to grow, to be comfort in your life. So I think that awareness is really so valuable. When somebody gets to a place where it's like, okay, maybe I have some self-awareness, maybe I can see where it is that I'm at, maybe what I'm struggling with. Then how do you take that focused energy and put it towards the areas that will start to move the needle? Because that's where the rubber meets the road in so many people's lives. It's like, okay, I feel like I'm maybe starting to understand how I got here. Now, what do I do? What are the pieces I need to really focus on so that I can get the results I'm looking for? What are those pieces that are at play that maybe some of them we're aware of and some of them we need to focus more effort on?
Exactly. Well, I love how you described that because essentially you said, hey, you may know your destination, but let's make sure you have a map to get there. And that map may be in the hands of a mentor who's giving you that perspective, and your wellness team who's giving you the tools. And then, of course, your own resourcefulness, which is just tuning into the educated advice that you trust. So this mapped process requires a few different components to be part of a robust map. And part of that is getting to know your behavior landscape. Sometimes when we're on our way to a new intervention or a goal or an aspiration, we don't yet even know what automated behaviors are happening that are tripping us up every time and getting in the way of the more conscious habits and conscious behaviors that we want to weave into our lives. So ultimately, a huge part of this map to get to this outcome where you want to be, that place that you see on your vision board, has to do with the architecture of habit formation and behavior design. So really getting to know what habits and what behaviors are necessary is going to be a big piece of the puzzle. However, I will say that 9 times out of 10, when a client comes barging into my office to really lay down exactly what's happening in their lives, and they're so excited about this new intervention, and they map out exactly what it is, the new habits, the new behaviors that they're hoping to integrate into their life, oftentimes it can be all of the combination of these new interventions are not only overwhelming, but far too large, and they are not integrated into an environment that facilitates success. So we want to back up a few steps, because when you take a goal as it pertains to weight or energy or cognitive clarity, you want to have a good pulse on what it is that is definitely in alignment with that outcome. But you want to make each habit and each behavior so palatable, so actionable, and your environment so facilitating towards that habit that you literally train this new neural pathway to perform the habit until it becomes automated. So not only do you want to audit your current habit structure and automations, but you also want to create a system where your new habits and your new behaviors are so beautifully placed or planted into the architecture of providing a cue and providing a reward, that automation of the new behavior becomes second nature. That's a big piece of the puzzle that I think is forgotten. So oftentimes we feel so critical and so defeated when we have this plan. It's so beautiful. It's had mentorship. It's very much maybe double, triple, quadruple checked by the latest science. But if we don't understand the architecture of the human brain, it's going to feel like we're being handed this table without instructions on how to build it.
Gosh, this is so rich. I love that this is what we're talking about right now. And you said something about identifying these things, right? Like creating that roadmap, deconstructing the action steps. But if you don't consider that if it's not integrated into the right environment, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So do you have a story or an example of this? Because I've never even thought about it this way, but I think this is maybe a struggle for so many people because they see it on paper, they see other people doing it on social media, and they're like, I can do those habits. And then they get into their real life and they're like, this doesn't fit. So what are the barriers in the environment? Like, help us bridge the gap, because that is a huge problem for so many people, I feel like. And there's got to be so many examples, of women where you've seen them be able to overcome that challenge.
Absolutely. How much time do you have? This is my favorite topic because it is truly that piece, that gap between intention and action needs to be bridged. And I am committed to bridging that gap for anyone I work with because it takes some of the criticism out of the knowing and the doing, and that maybe that dysregulation where you feel like you know exactly what to do, but when it comes to the facilitation of it in your own environment, you don't know where to start. So let's take something really simple, which I think pertains to a lot of health goals. And I'll give you a few examples of what I've seen. And I think this will very much spark some creative ideas around how you could emulate this with other habits. But I would say when it comes to nutrition, a habit that a lot of us talk about, and I've heard you talk many times about on the podcast, is the consumption of the building block of life, protein. So we learn about it and we get some education around what protein does. And, especially if you're in the longevity space, you're learning about the use of protein to rebuild your muscles and your bones and give you the building blocks to your neurotransmitters. So you're all hyped up on protein and you know exactly how much to eat and you know exactly where to get it from, especially maybe you find protein sources that are really in alignment with your values. So you've got that dialed in. And then you wake up and it's time to go. It's Monday morning and you open up your fridge to pack your food for the day or get your kids ready for school. And there's actually no protein in the fridge. So all of a sudden you're going to the next space, which is, okay, where am I going to pick up protein and how am I going to find it and how am I going to integrate it into my meals? And so your environment already, this micro environment called the fridge, has already tripped you up. Or maybe there's even one step further. There is protein in the fridge, but it's hidden with all the other maybe lower protein deficient foods that you're used to consuming. And so the cue is not necessarily to eat the protein, nor is the reward. And so your brain is not being given the beautiful architectural cues to start this new protein habit. So you get to the end of the day and you still know exactly how much protein to be eating. You're still fully committed to the success of integrating protein into your life. But because your microenvironment did not facilitate that, and you were given no opportunity to make this as easy as ever, you want to trip over your habits. You want them to be so simple that they literally come to you and your environment cues you, then you're going to go into tomorrow with a sense of defeat. And turns out human beings don't change when we feel bad about ourselves. We change when we actually feel good about ourselves. So not only being cued by your environment to build this new habit, as simple as it is, to maybe even just eat protein with breakfast, you're not giving yourself even a chance. But the next piece to the puzzle that is even more important, I would say, than your environment cueing the behavior, or equally as important, is actually the celebration of doing that habit when you do it. So even if we do the habit, I see opportunities missed to bathe in those feel good, happy hormones that tell you that you did a good job by celebrating the completion of that habit. So I see more often than not, either the environment is not setting you up to make this easy, or you bulldoze your way onto the next habit because you did this one and you forget to encode the win into your system. Talk about little dogs. Can you imagine? So as you get ready to train your little puppy, as I'm getting ready to do, it's a big, big undertaking. We know that if we're training our puppy to do something new and we cue them to do it, will they do it tomorrow, or will they do it again even in the day if we ask them to do it and then just walk away? Or will they perform it with more excitement and engagement if we celebrate the heck out of them and we tell them how amazing they are? We clap our hands, we say, good puppy. Our brain receives that type of celebration very similarly. It lights up this reward center in our brain and enables us to repeat it with more confidence, more self-efficacy, and more agency the following day.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I love that you just made a whole visual of the puppies, because if y'all saw me in my front yard right now, when that dog pees or poops in my yard and not in my house, I mean, you'd think I lost my ever loving mind. Like you would have
Oh,
thought I won the lottery. Like
yes.
it is so the puppy is like rolling on the ground. Like she's probably like, I have no idea why we're so excited jumping up and down. But I'm like, listen, that is one less like bowel movement I'm cleaning up off my rug. So
Exactly.
I am very pleased. But that
Yes,
really brings, I mean, honestly, guys, we just have to realize like we have got to dumb it down. And it's
we
not
do.
dumb to have to do that. I just read something yesterday and it was a woman talking about decluttering your life. And
Mhm.
part of how she accomplished this was really only giving herself 3 goals a day. And in the very beginning, she said that she had to actually write down very simple steps. Like if it was
Mhm.
instead of just writing down like catch up on emails, she's like, I would write down that one step. I would write, open your laptop, open your Gmail. Now, populate all of the emails or the ones that are starred that need to be responded to, like group those together. Now go through them in order and
Yes,
respond to each one of them. And she was like, once I started writing that down and my brain started reading it and receiving it, I felt like, okay, I took that task from start to finish. Like now I know I'm not just putting it off. Or she's like, because most of these tasks, like they don't take a ton of time, but they may involve multiple steps and we're distracted doing so many other things. So we just don't get them done. And then we think like we're just incapable. I just
exactly.
can't, I just don't have enough hours. I don't have enough focus. My brain is too clouded and brain fogged. I can't think through all of this. So that micro environment, like deconstruct it into the most simple steps. I know you may think I'm 40 years old. I'm 50 years old. Why do I don't need a list like a kindergartner. Well, newsflash, maybe you do. If we can't get them to,
Exactly.
and you're not alone, like that's not to say
No.
anything in shame. And you really can't, like another point that you made, you cannot shame yourself into change. So
Mm-mm.
just beating yourself up at the end of the day is not going to make you get up the next day and be like, you know what? Today I got it. Just like you said, if there's
Yes.
absolutely no reward, the dog's going to not know if they did it right or wrong. It's like, cool, I pooped in the house, I pooped outside, nobody seems to care. So I'll just go wherever I need to go. So you can just think about that next
Exactly.
time.
Right. I
Just
hope
compare yourself to a puppy.
exactly. I mean, that goes such a long way because, again, celebration, especially an outward celebration, like the clapping or the high five or the maybe universal expression of "yay," it seems so superficial, and my clients literally giggle about it. And when they do, I say, "Okay, good," because what that means is it's big enough that you are grabbing a dopamine hit of "yay, go me." And when you successfully get that dopamine, you are actually leveraging your brain and not overlooking a tool that you have encoded into your system. It's like the highest return on investment. So, what I usually hand my clients is this list of 102 ways to celebrate a new behavior. And I let them choose for them, but I really ask that they pick something that they could see themselves doing after most new behaviors, just like a puppy dog. Our trainer said, hey, pick a word that you want your dog to tag with a new behavior. So we're total geeks here and we pick the word bingo. So anytime our sweet puppy does something we want her to do, we're out in our backyard saying bingo, bingo. And it's amazing. We see her light up, we see her lick her lips. And similarly, if we choose a form of celebration that really does give us that little fist pump internally or maybe externally, what we're starting to do is build this new neural pathway and build this sense of confidence. And when you repeat things that are in alignment with where you're headed, so we have this outcome, but this is now mapping the process, and you keep repeating this with this inner knowing and this sense of deep confidence, your external environment cannot help but shift to reflect this new internal goal that you have. It's no longer just a sense of knowing, it's now a sense of being.
Wow. And I think that identifying there that influences the environment, that it's not the other way around. Like sometimes we just think, well, the environment is making me so sick. Like I have these kids that scream and cry at me. I have a messy house because I have kids and a dog, and I have, a spouse or whatever that's not encouraging me and they're not celebrating me. Like the key here is that you have to reframe your perspective. Nobody else is going to be able to do that. And if you rely on the climate of wherever it is that you're at, whatever your household looks like, I'm telling you, it's going to serve you a lot of disappointment. And yet
Yes.
that will manifest in your physical. There is no question about that. We know that on so many different levels. So if you start adopting mindsets and perspectives that, you know what, there's no way I'm going to achieve my health goals because look at the household that I'm living in, that nobody is on the same page. Nobody is trying to frame me up for success. Like you may have to be the cheerleader. Like you may have to be your own
Yes.
cheerleader. Many of I think that we have to at this point to some degree. You will have other people to celebrate you, but they're not going to be there sitting at your desk being like, great job. You answered your emails today. So let that be an
Yes.
encouragement. Whatever you're doing, go above and beyond. Whatever you think is necessary, you likely need to go a little bit more. Like make it something exaggerated, at least at first, so that you can start doing that work of resetting those neural pathways, really starting to create new habits where your body is now bent to do the things that support where you're going, as opposed to sitting where you are, staying where you are, and avoiding or not being able to get into a path of growth.
Exactly. What you just described is actually so beautifully aligned with the Stanford behavior design model of behavior change. They call it, actually, ironically to this conversation, a map, where they discuss any new behavior as a reflection of the amount of motivation you have, the ability you have, and the prompt to perform it. So motivation, ability, and prompt. It's a map. And to your point, if you're looking for your environment to change to facilitate a habit before you actually give yourself one of these three cues, either more motivation, which we know motivation can be very fleeting. So I would not recommend that that's the first one you give yourself, but maybe you just give yourself more ability by taking away some of the facets of your environment that create friction, and then give yourself a prompt. Your environment can't help but change. So think of that map of saying, hey, if my motivation isn't high to do this new thing, how could I make it so easy that I don't have to have motivation? Because motivation will come and go. And how do I make sure that within my environment, there is a prompt that doesn't have to be from outside of me necessarily? I don't have to depend on someone to make sure my office is tidy before I start email. The prompt can be so simple that it creates this sense of repetition just because it's always in eyesight and waiting for you to initiate the new behavior.
So good. I think this is really laying the groundwork and framework or the architecture for the toggles that many of us we've got our hands on. And it could be nutrition, it could be the fasting windows, the meal timing, working on stress adaptation, all of these different things we're learning about. And so we're trying to keep our hand on these different toggles to figure out, hey, if I move this one a little bit, does that change the way that I feel? Does that give me more energy, less brain fog? Do I feel less bloated? So let's maybe pivot there, because I think that these are the pieces of the puzzle where we kind of don't really seem to have, many people, and myself included, don't always have an understanding of where they fall. Like, how do I need to orchestrate these pieces so that they're working together and I'm not leaving things out on the table that are undernourished, they're underfed. So when we talk, you actually have a really pretty image. So I'm actually looking at this, guys. If you're listening, you'll have to go to the show notes to get this image because we'll link it there. But it's kind of it lays out, it's a picture of metabolic mastery. So it lays out these 6 different pieces that are all playing into your metabolic health. And metabolism just in general is kind of, something that I feel like now it's everywhere. Everybody's talking about metabolic health and metabolic optimization. And I think that's great, but I think some people may not understand. We just assume on a very simplistic level, metabolism is like, how well do you burn fat efficiently? Like,
Exactly.
if you are sedentary, overweight, whatever, body composition isn't ideal, then you have a slow metabolism. That's kind of the very remedial. I feel like that's the way we've all been conditioned to think about it. But we are becoming more educated and understanding that there's a lot more at play, and the metabolism is actually a lot different than what we really think about as just being a fat burning machine. So can you maybe break down what metabolic mastery looks like when you're coaching people, those different pieces of the puzzle that they're evaluating, and how you would decide whether or not one thing is more important than another for someone to achieve their goals?
Yes. So I love teaching on metabolic health, again, to enable anybody who is sitting across from me to reclaim their confidence over what the metabolism is and how to approach it from so many different angles that they never feel stuck. So one of the best ways that I describe the metabolism is really that it is the song of the cell. We all have 30 to 50 trillion cells in our bodies, and they need to take in information from our environment and from our food, anything that we're exposed to in our daily lives, and make energy out of it, make meaning out of that exposure. And so when you're sitting here thinking that you're seeing weight retention, your energy is starting to fluctuate, you've got brain fog, to a certain degree, all of those have to do with the metabolism. It's not as reductionistic as we think, that it's just weight gain or weight loss, fat burning or fat loss. It's really this song that is sung by the cell by taking in this information, and really that the cells need adjustment from a few different angles to be able to sing this song. So I like to give my clients the map that you're linking to in the show notes that gives 6 different trailheads to metabolic health, because 9 times out of 10, I would even say 10 times out of 10, someone who walks into my office who is frustrated about their weight, frustrated about their energy, frustrated about these symptoms of metabolic dysfunction, they have completely overlooked at least one of these trailheads. So it's the most empowering thing that I can say to them, to say, hey, let's not go to the one trailhead you know of and do it better. That's the definition of insanity. Because if you go back to what I said before, what you were doing maybe a decade or 2 ago is no longer in alignment with the gorgeous biochemistry of the you of today, because of these transitions we're always going through. So what I'd love to do is dance our way around the 6 trailheads, starting with the one that I think it's overlooked the most. And that is actually the opening of drainage and detox pathways. We get so hung up with what to eat, when to eat, all of these different maybe cues that we're hearing about. It would take a spreadsheet to figure it all out. Whereas sometimes we just need to get out of our own way and release metabolic waste. So my specialty is in women's wellness and hormone balance. So I'm always talking to my clients about, let's not just make sure you're repleting your estrogen appropriately. Are you actually detoxing your estrogen appropriately? Because you could be eating the most perfect nutrient-rich diet that helps you really metabolize maybe the estrogen that you're producing, but are you actually going through all 3 phases of estrogen detox? Because we live in an environment that mimics estrogen. So we live kind of in estrogen soup, from our chemicals and our beauty products, and just our environment tends to have specific chemicals and pollutants that mimic estrogen. So if we're trying to optimize our metabolic experience, we have to focus on out as often as we're focusing on in. And that relates just to making sure foundationally, you guys talk about this a lot on this podcast, your liver, is it functioning properly? Are you having 1 to 3 bowel movements a day? We're going back to the puppies. They are. Make sure we are. Lymph drainage. Are we moving our lymph by moving our bodies? Kidney function. Are they properly filtering our blood and our endocrine and our lymph system appropriately? So as we look at all of these organs of elimination, that in and of itself is half the battle. And it's so easy to start with something as simple as making sure that someone is seeing bowel movements every day. That in and of itself, constipation, is a key cause of metabolic dysfunction. And yet the client who's constipated is trying the next diet.
So good. I love talking about these foundations because they are really important. I mean, that is a very quantifiable way of evaluating your metabolic health. If you are constipated, you are not detoxing, which means that you are backing up the system of toxins. And we live in a very toxic world, far more than our parents did and our grandparents. And the other thing is too, there's an emotional component. So what is it that your body's holding on to that it's afraid to release, right? So I've seen this with so many clients. They have unaddressed emotional traumas in their life that are contributing to them being constipated. Now, I'm not saying, everybody needs to evaluate in deep therapy, but I am saying that it's not something to overlook, because I've experienced this and I've seen so many clients, and we're trying to force their body to do something when they're really so bound up from stress and anxiety, and they maybe have bitterness. They're afraid that they don't know where they're going in life. So their body is holding on to things. It's literally holding on to your bowels. Like,
Yes.
think about that. Like, it's
Con-
just,
yes. I mean, could we call it constipation of emotion, right? Like even
yeah,
just the release of our thoughts,
yeah,
because our thoughts become our words become our beliefs, and our beliefs become our actions.
yeah.
And so even though we see this, our thought life and our emotional life as very abstract, I can tell you that the women under mentorship, and I've always sought mentorship over this myself because it's been it's played that big of an impact on my life, is the capacity to take this abstract idea like an emotion and a feeling and really grapple with the allowance of that feeling to really make its way through your system and not pause in your body physically and really show up and manifest physically.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So
Yeah.
address the emotions along with evaluating some of the metabolic markers. So liver health being one, detox drainage pathways. This is a big one. What else is there? What are the other things that people can be clued into to really understand where their health is at on the spectrum of metabolic health?
Yes. Well, I think a really gentle and elegant segue from drainage and detox is that transition into, well, then when am I eating? Am I giving my body enough time and space to use the information I'm giving it? Because if we go back to that working definition of metabolic health, it is just information that you're giving your body and how it's actually registering that information and making something meaningful out of it, like ATP and energy. So when you look at the six trailheads, one of them right above drainage and detox is timing of food. And I do think that it's possible to quickly become dogmatic about this, but let's just go back to the basics and think about just being consistent, repeating when you eat, very much again like a puppy dog, where you just give your body access to information in a very routine and rhythmic manner. So when I'm teaching this, I will often teach clients to just mimic the circadian day. So the sunlight hours, really trying to eat within that time frame and close out your food window at least an hour or two before you go to bed, at least, because then that initiates the beginning of the release of metabolic waste. So again, before we get hung up in what to eat and how to perfect the plate, which is usually where people want to jump in, they want to create that fix, especially if they're in that state of rupture. Let's just go back to when you eat and make sure that you create enough safety in your body to know that it's going to get fuel. Even if you do practice extended fasting intermittently or consistently, be consistent about the timing of food so that it's not fasting. If you try it on for size, is not just another form of inconsistency that's ultimately stressful, especially for the female body.
Yeah, I would say if you're trying to practically get yourself out of maybe some binge habits, because a lot of times we can start our day really well, but we don't finish that strong because by the end of the
Exactly.
day, we tired. By the end of the day, patience has run dry. We got nothing left
Yes,
in the tank for anybody's bad attitudes, comments, back talk, anything.
exactly.
So bookend your days. I have found this to be so helpful. When you get up, you got a clean slate. Mercies are
Yes.
new every day. Live in that grace. Get up
Mhm.
and get a handle on your day. Do those practices that are going to set you up for success. Now, what happens between that time and the time you lay your head on a pillow at the end of the day? There's a lot of variables that you cannot control that may just come firing at you like bullets out of the trenches. Like you just don't know. That's okay. Like
Yep.
manage those as best you can. But at the end of the day, again, you have an opportunity to set yourself up for good recovery so that you can have a new start and another strong day the next day. And all of it trickles down. So, like your blood sugar the next day, everything is going to hinge on how you handle the recovery portion. You're not going to get it right every time. I mean, I don't
No,
get it right every time. But
no.
if you can just bookend your days, have a good evening practice and a good morning practice, you will be able to increase the threshold for your body to adapt to stress during the day. And that is ultimately going to serve you because, like I said, you may not be able to control all the circumstances in your life. But if you have the capacity to manage some of those stressors, they're not going to wipe you out. Like you're not going to get to the end of the day and feel like, someone just dragged you behind the bumper of a bus. So those are those to me are anchor points where I'm like, okay, we're in the middle of the day where I'm in the trenches taking grenades. But I know
Right,
that
right.
I can really anchor myself in good practices in the morning, good practices in the evening. Now, I'm not saying it needs to be miserable every day. You certainly don't want that. Not every day is like that, but that's just a personal take. Cause I love that we're talking about these things because again, this is simplifying some of the strategies and the stuff you may see on social media. And it's like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if that's going to help me.
Right.
So,
And it's contextualizing it. So if you understand, if you aren't just coming at fasting because you saw this really compelling TikTok about fasting and now you feel like you should just do it, again, you're seeing how it relates to this bigger picture of metabolic health. Maybe closing your food window, no matter what is happening and what fires are brewing in the house, at least closing your window a few hours before you go to bed is helping your body drain itself and prepare for another day. When you look at it like that, that is grace-led compassion. It's coming at it like a human and not a robot. And you said something I want to come back to that was really important. You said, we're not going to get it perfect. And I would actually say failure is the most impactful part of this process of behavior design, because in the failure is the feedback. In what you feel like is the mess is the message. And so if you don't do something new, you are basically telling yourself that you're not willing to risk failure. But failure is that moment where you can intercept and say, how could I have made this a bit easier? What was my cue and what was my reward for doing this? Were any of those pieces missing? 9 times out of 10, one of those pieces, at least one, will be missing from the scenario. So I would say as you make your way through anything new, especially as it pertains to a clinical intervention like metabolic health, be very, very much on the lookout, embrace, maybe receive this news, this beautiful and very impactful information that I think culturally we shun, which is failure.
yeah, 1,000%. Guys, nobody grows by avoiding pain in their life. Like
Oh, right.
you are not going to experience breakthrough and be released from strongholds in your life, no matter what it looks like. Maybe it's poor eating habits. Maybe it's, well, I just, at the end of the day, I just can't stop munching on food. Or maybe it's the self-talk. Maybe you are literally like your worst friend. Like you were the friend that if the voice in your head was an actual physical person, you would never be friends with them. But you live with that person. You are in that person and you are listening to that voice every day. So if you just think, well, if I just avoid all of this, then I'll be safe. No, it's pain to purpose. Like lean into and embrace those failures because it's how you change your perspective of the pain that allows you to birth something new that is going to be a much better version of yourself. So don't just, that is not, I think so many of us just are so conditioned to avoid pain. Like we've experienced so much and it's like, I want to skirt around it. Like I can't go through anymore. I know I gotta let you just like jump in here because I can see.
Oh my gosh, I'm bubbling right now. So I will say that pain is definitely, and again, I told you my story began with really actually deciding early on as a little girl and a swimmer that pain was almost something wasn't good unless it was painful. And so it's interesting, as an athlete I was trained that way, but then culturally I felt this internal tug of war because culturally we're being told pain is actually means you're doing something wrong. So I had to come to grips with what pain really is doing for us, and I landed on this very maybe aligned concept that pain is just a professor. It's, pain is really this opportunity to get the information on how this transition is putting us back into alignment. I love how you said the growth that the expansive growth that we're destined to experience as evolved human beings who are seeking out this consistent revolution is really a portion of that is allowing our pain to be a bit of an alchemist in that process. Now, pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. I think often we will take pain and we will turn it into suffering out of dutiful diligence, right? And so that's where I would discourage anyone listening from saying pain is so good that we have to suffer. Pain is part of the growth process, but when you don't take the information that pain, professor that has his PhD in knowing you, when you don't take that information and run with it, that's typically when I see pain turning into suffering. Would you agree?
Oh my gosh. I mean, girl, preach it. Like, I just, I love this so much. It is like allow your pain to teach you. I oftentimes I'll just tell myself, like, how can I wring this out where there's nothing left? Like, if this is the storm, if this is my battle, and maybe it's something so simple, maybe it's not like a huge thing. Like you're not maybe navigating a major life decision, like, destiny type decisions, but it could just be something that you're like, man, I have this habit that I do all the time that I just can't seem to overcome. Like, you overcoming that, like wring that out, like really sit with that long enough to be like, where did this come from? When did I start believing this that led to me adopting this as a part of my perspective or shaping the way that I behave in a certain way? And when you can really, like, I'm telling you, like, don't just try and find a simple solution for it, because generally if it's like real baked in, like I'm talking the stuff you've been doing for decades and whatever that is, you fill in the blank, you're going to have to sit with it for a while to figure out its origin story. Because until you can identify where it came from, you're never going to be able to be released from that stronghold. Like that, whatever that might be, you've got to be able to trace back where it came from. And that takes some time. But again, by you wringing out that storm for everything it's worth as something that is an instrument in your change, it is teaching you, you will walk forward with so much clarity and intention in what you are doing, because now it's like, there is no struggle to make the decision. Like I know where I've been. I know what I hitched my cart to. I know that I'm free from that. And I know that what I'm doing now is so intentional that it's effortless. Like I run to that. That's like, my nature is to gravitate towards that now. So there's so much psychological, there's such a component here of really retraining yourself, but ultimately to retrain yourself, you have to know yourself. And I think that's where a lot of work, and I love that that's what a lot of your work does, is helping women identify, I mean, and men, but I feel like I say that a lot. I'm sorry to the men that are listening.
It's just the nature of who
I'm just so selfish. I think about women all the time because I am one. So I can't say that I've lived, a man's life ever. So that's just my inclination. But, we love the men that support the show. But all that to say, just to round out what you're saying, I think we're really just like bringing so much shape and clarity to this concept that you really have to understand like what it is that your proclivities are for in order to be able to access healing for it and to be able to stick with it. And that's not such a simple, like it can be deconstructed, but it's likely something you're just going to have to get up every day and face, and not try and skirt around or not try and put a biohacking tool on. Like, stop doing all the things that, like, if you would just deal with your grief, you wouldn't have to spend 3 hours a day trying to avoid the anxiety that's driving all the sadness.
Right.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes. You're touching on something, an exercise even that I have found to be very impactful for anyone seeking this safety that you described. Because what you described is by getting very familiar with your emotional landscape and going back to the origin story of where some of these patterns came from. What you described so beautifully is safety that enables you to feel so with so much fluidity and alignment that you tap into the power of your intuition. So that's where you said things start to feel easier. Well, when things feel easier, it means your compass is your intuition now, but it requires enough safety to be in that place where you pull out your intuition and use it as a compass. So one exercise to make this very tangible, because for anyone listening, I know if I was even listening to this as a swimmer that was just, very much magnetized by grit and effort, I would think this was so far out of reach. Where do I even begin? And what I have my clients do is after they've taken stock of what their day entails, maybe by doing it in third person, like the bug book, maybe first person because they feel ready for that. I have them identify with each thing that they perform throughout the day, what emotion that elicited. This is a big piece of the puzzle that is often missing because we have been taught how to become emotionally illiterate. We live our lives in the realm of happy, sad, and mad. And when I'm asking clients to say, well, how did that actually make you feel? So I hand them a list, almost like a dictionary of feelings, and help them make their way towards a place where they get more granular and more accurate about how certain things made them feel throughout the day. And then the next piece of the exercise, once you get more comfortable, really describing how things made you feel, really understanding maybe some of the deeper facets of that situation, you start to identify the clarity of needs unmet. Because often when we are tracking our emotional landscape, we can get clarity on whether that the emotion that was elicited from that was out of safety and needs met, or the emotion elicited was actually a reflection of needs unmet. And it's usually over long periods of time where needs are unmet that they become a stronghold in your life. Those are the constipations we talked about that haven't been dealt with. So it's a very gentle untangling. I really don't like even talking about habits or behaviors through the lens of let's break that habit or let's break that behavior. Because as we're untangling here, it's rooted in the emotional landscape. Any habit has emotions behind it. Yeah. And we need to be very gentle and very soft about that process by first just getting to know the emotional landscape of that behavior to begin with.
The emotional landscape. I love that like phrase and that wording, because that is really the emotional landscape can derail you faster than a bad diet. I'm telling you, it is, we can really quantify and measure the bad diet because it's like, okay, well, I went and ate fast food and then I felt really bad and have poor digestion. But the emotions, those are the subconscious things many times that have been there for a long time. And I feel this so strongly on my heart. So I'm just going to say it because if you're listening, maybe this is for you. The greatest thing, the biggest success that you may have in this season of your life is just to heal and work on the emotional work.
Yes.
You release yourself of the expectation that you need to have your macros dialed in, that you need to be in the gym lifting weights, that you need to be doing all of these extra things that we talk about, which are super helpful and they're great pieces of your health puzzle. But if you do nothing else right now, if you are avoiding and numbing, like you were just saying, Ellie, talking about the emotions and getting people to really start to pinpoint, how do I feel? Because we have never lived in a time where people are so numbed out to their feelings. And it is unbelievable how many people have just learned coping mechanisms of distracting themselves to feel nothing. And they never live understanding where these emotions have been rooted in their bodies. And then all of a sudden, the physical breakdown happens. That physical manifestation of the unaddressed emotion and experience that you had 10 years ago is now showing up as psoriasis and leaky gut and autoimmune disorders. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go deep down the rabbit hole of dialing in my diet and eliminating all the inflammatory foods. Great. That's awesome. But let me just tell you, you may get very marginally better before you start to realize that your body will then go break down somewhere else. And you will spend a lifetime, the rest of your life, being distracted from the very thing that if you were to have addressed it in the very beginning, you wouldn't have to spend hours and hours of your day trying to keep your body together. And I just feel that that's like, if you are so tired of trying so many different things and listening to so many podcasts, you're like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. This may just be your season where all you need to worry about is addressing the emotional health of yourself. Like, where are you at? That is the only thing. Don't give yourself grace. Like you said, Ellie, like so much grace in all the other areas, but let that be the benchmark of, have I successfully grown in this season? If you can address some of those emotions, that may be the greatest win you put on the scoreboard that impacts a trajectory of decades before you.
Exactly. Well, I think that really illustrates maybe a tangible way of looking at this. The way that you described that was so gorgeous, in that I think we all, to a certain degree, have an iceberg in our life. And the crevices that you see above the water, it's so tempting to pull out an ice pick and a larger ice pick and a larger ice pick. I am just as guilty of this as anyone else, saying, okay, this time if it's just the largest ice pick, I'll get rid of this prominent piece that I see outside the water, whether it is weight or anxiety or lethargy, anything that you see to be a problem. It is very, I mean, we see everyone around us pulling out the ice picks and biohacking their way back to a place where it's beneath the surface of the water. But if you get really familiar, so maybe pop on a scuba mask and dive down to the deeper layers of that iceberg before you even make an intervention, and just get to know that iceberg from a 360-degree angle. Because when you get to know it, it's less scary. So to your point, when you actually understand your emotional landscape, it's no longer the scary monster in the closet. It's just, it becomes more neutral and more maybe approachable. And once you start to then get to know the patterns of that emotional landscape, then you start to address it from a place where you take back what's in alignment with your truest self, and you aren't doing what the world encourages you to do, which is to take a break from your life and then get back to it. So peace is the reward for dealing with the hard thing head on by going to that deepest layer. And when you show up to meet your needs from that place of love instead of obligation, you shift into this gorgeous space of softness and receptivity. And I'll tell you what, as a biochemist, I can say that's when the body heals. That is when you actually reclaim the song of the cell. You come back to this place when you're meeting needs out of that place of compassion and love, that the cells can actually feel enough safety to start talking to each other again and start communicating and going back to the way that they were designed to operate. So it seems like this may feel like extra steps along your journey. Maybe thinking, okay, now just tell me how much protein to eat, or tell me what supplements to take, but you're going to shortcut so many of those extra steps. You're going to prevent the need for having to take the perfect supplement deck and make the perfect plate if you are in this space where your body feels safe enough to heal because its needs are being met emotionally.
So good, Ellie. We're in flow right now, y'all. I don't know if you can tell. Like, I mean, I record a lot of podcasts, and but there are certain episodes where I'm like, we're flowing, and I think that there's even something to be said about that in your life. Like, what areas are not flowing in your life that you have now just decided, well, this is something I'm committed to, and I'm just going to keep pushing it, and you're getting nothing but resistance. Like, let go of those things that the favor is not on. Like, some people are just trying so hard to push their body like a square peg in a round hole. And I say this with all compassion because I see myself do this. I could look back on so many seasons and see where I have done this and where I'm currently doing. And I'm doing a lot of this awareness, just ultimately holding up all my choices, everything that I'm doing is this contributing to me achieving my purpose in life? Because if I don't know, then at what point did I decide that this was a good idea? Where is it coming? What is making me want to participate in this? So I just think that for so many of us, this could be such a valuable exercises to do. And there's like a million ways to skin the cat. Just like you said, there are so many different tools that we have access to, visuals like the iceberg, or looking at a bunch of different words and being able to try and assess like where do we fall? Where do we fit into all of this? Use these tools, guys. If nothing else, like, like the blue blockers are great, the red light is great, the sauna is great, all these cold plunge, whatever. But if you were doing all of that, exhausting yourself, and at the end of the day, you have anxiety, I would say I would just go sit down with a notepad and I would just start letting things flow. Let it flow. Like, that is in my life. I'm like, where do I feel that I've got some good flow? And here's the thing, you get 1 point on the board. So whatever that is that we talked about, the celebration, get that point on the board. We talked about motivation and momentum. That will build momentum, which then drives the motivation to show up and do it again. That's how that
Yes.
cycle works. So
Yes.
get yourself some wins, give yourself plenty of grace. Be like, you know what? The nutrition, I'm going to buy healthy food, but I'm not going to worry about, did I prep it all? Is it all in a glass container? Didn't touch any
Yes.
BPA? Didn't, I got all my things lined up. Like, give yourself tons of grace, but be like, you know what? I'm committing to sitting down and I'm going to start journaling. All the things that I keep
Yes.
avoiding, I'm going to start spilling them out on paper. And it might not even make sense to you. When I started doing this practice, it never made sense. I was like, these are words, but
Yeah,
words turn into
exactly.
sentences, which start to
Mhm.
formulate the internal thoughts that are ruminating in your mind that are solidifying the emotional injuries to your body. So you've got to get that. You got to
Yes.
purge. That is a detox right there. Emotional detox.
Oh,
I
that
don't know
is
why.
drainage and detox at the deepest level, at the soul level. And what you said, I just think is so powerful. When you show up in this way, where you don't necessarily even know what the outcome is, but you're just getting things out so that you can hold space for it and allow, I love this word allowance, where you allow this fluidity of your emotional experience to go somewhere besides just your head. What you're doing is you're starting to build this sense of competence in the new reality of what tomorrow's potential can be. Because when
Yeah.
we don't metabolize our life on paper and we allow what's sort of rumbling around in our head to come out, we constantly go back to our old reality. We replay a pattern of the past. But by metabolizing this, think about it actually physically, like you're creating space for this newness. You're creating competence and confidence for this belief that things can change to take root in your system.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in my PhD program right now studying self-efficacy. And I'll tell you, as a research student, that self-efficacy, that agency piece that I just clicked on, is really the bow and tie to everything. No matter how you perform a habit, how well you celebrate it, how well it was cued, how well it's in alignment with what your body needs. If you believe or don't believe it can happen, you're right. So it's very important that we have enough space to have that agency so that as you experience those tiny milestones and as you experience just even the succession of progress, you give yourself the opportunity to be successful instead of allowing the whisperings, the ghosts of old past to trip you up every time inadvertently. I think that's the piece that's really hard is we don't even realize what a big role
Yeah.
this plays in preventing us from believing in a new reality.
Gosh, so good. Are y'all loving this that are listening?
Oh,
Like, I am loving this because I feel like this is preaching to my soul right now. And it's reminding me of so many things. And it's bringing like such a human, just a real level of humanness to this
yes.
conversation about our health because you can split hairs. I mean, our bodies are just so incredibly created and so complex. And, you can really try and like I say, get very granular. And sometimes that's really cool. And you can see cause and effect and it's great. But at the end of the day, we're also spiritual, soulful beings. And
Yes.
that to its core, I mean, that carries far more weight to how you experience life than just splitting hairs, and looking at all of these like small little finite pieces. Like I said, that can be useful for sure. There's a place for it. But I love that we just honed in so much on this. And I'm really, I pray that it has spoken to you on a level that gives you hope, gives you
Mhm.
encouragement, but also gives you some confidence to do the thing that you've been fearing the most. And you know what
Yes.
that is. Whatever that is, do not let another moment pass by. Like, rein that in. Do something today. Like, you're listening to this podcast right now, I believe, for a reason. So do not let that moment pass you by because there, like I said, there's nothing that would be greater to the enemy than just to have you listen to something and then not move on it. And whether you believe
Exactly.
in, a spiritual life or not, there's something out for your soul. And so this is a call to action to do some deep work that is going to release you into a blessing that I believe is already there. It's already there for you. You just got to be able to access it. So, I mean, Ellie, like we could do like 6 more podcasts because I feel like
No
we scratched the
kidding.
surface of like what you
Oh,
do. But
Yes.
for somebody that is, y'all, and her social media is great. You have great content, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
you've got great visuals. And I know the one that we started to talk about a little bit, we're going to drop in our show notes, but what are like some final thoughts that you want to impart to our listeners based on all of the work? You're so brilliant. Like,
Thank you.
I mean, oh my gosh, like how I don't even know how you've had time to do all the things that you have, but you have a lot of life experience, but you've got a lot of experience in really studying this stuff and seeing how it works in people's lives. Like, final thoughts for our listeners on based on where we've been in this conversation, where we've kind of landed here towards the end. I would love to just give you the floor to share.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. You've just put this conversation into a place where we can catalyze deep thoughts. So it's been so fun. I'm fully in tachycardia over this. So I just would say and empower everyone listening that you are more powerful than you believe, and and really to tap into that deep potential. I'm just going to empower you to consistently and bravely and precisely follow that inner knowing, that deep, bubbly intuition that you have, because the more precisely and consistently you follow that, the more beautiful your outer world becomes, and it puts you back into that space of alignment. And in that space of alignment, you heal and you bless the people around you. And so I know it's tempting to look outside of ourselves to serve the people we love and really make sure that we are maybe following cues that we're being told to do to heal. But when you look within, when you become more self-aware, and when you stop searching for outer approval and you look for inner wisdom, it saves you from living someone else's life. And you tap into that beautiful, that foundational underpinning of trust in something so much bigger, and not the fear that prevents you from reaching your highest potential.
Gosh, so good. Oh man, I'm so encouraged. Y'all, I have like goosebumps.
I do too. I
I
just
get
fully got
so,
goosebumps when I said that. And that was just not from me. I just know that this is the message I'm designed
yeah,
to serve, especially women
yeah,
who are on their healing journey. So I'm
yeah.
glad we got the goosebumps collaboratively on that one.
Yeah. The favor is on this conversation, and I know it's going to bless so many of us. It's blessed me, honestly. And I've
Likewise.
listened to you on other podcasts, and I knew it was going to be a good conversation no matter what, because you're so educated and such a beautiful communicator. But I was really encouraged by this, and hopefully you guys listening, if you love this message, make sure you go follow her work. You have a great website.
Thank
It's
you.
like, I love the way that it's laid out, and there's so many different resources, different ways to connect. She has a membership that's incredible. So there's different ways for you to access her and ultimately like her life's work, like what she's doing, what she's passionate about. So we'll link all of that for you in the show notes for you guys to get your hands on. If you loved this episode, share it with a friend. You can DM me or Ellie or the Health Institute. We love getting feedback. We love reviews too. I don't know if I've ever said that, but like, we do love reviews. We read them. So if you have a moment, drop us a review. And guys, we'll see you on the next episode. I hope you have a blessed week.